Buried Deep by Allison Miller. Chapter 1. Henry. Henry Post sat in his car outside his friend Rick Denton's house and belabored going in. Rick had recently lost someone he once cared about, and he was in danger of relapsing. Henry was nominated to be the one to keep him on the wagon. His phone went off with a notification. Rick, please get in here. My kids are here, and I have no idea how to talk to them. He gave up the idea of going home and got out of his car. Rick's beater was parked the closest. Then a black Suzuki or something similar was parked near, and off on its own so no other cars would soil it, sat a red Aston Martin Vantage. It was a late 2000s model, but it was kept up well. No one Rick knew had a car like this. Maybe he'd be able to tell whose car it was when he got in the house. 3 pairs of shoes sat by the door. Rick's work boots, new tennis shoes, and sky-high dark chocolate pumps with a red bottom. They all sat in the living room. The 2 kids, a woman and a man, stared at their phones, awkwardly at each other, and then back at their phones. I suppose I'll welcome our guest, Rick said. He's your friend, said the daughter. She was tall, with one long leg crossed over the other, chewing the end of her thumb and scrolling. She had to be the owner of the expensive shoes and flashy car. Anyway, this is my son, Jory, and this is my daughter, Veronica, Rick said. The boy waved without looking at him, and the girl looked up. Does your friend have a name? Veronica asked. His name is Post, Rick said. Henry corrected. Post is my last name. The boy looked at Henry, and then to his dad. All of them had these blue eyes that held anyone they spoke to in rapt attention. They were all tall, too. The daughter had the same auburn hair Rick had. The boy's hair was dark, but he had a similar bone structure. Veronica rose and said, Well, I guess I'm making dinner. The men were more than happy to let her cook all the food. She crossed the room, commanding Henry's attention with the way her skirt swished and swayed around her knees. Are you staying for dinner? She asked. Henry muttered and stuttered. Yes, he is, Rick said. She got close to him, placed her fingers on his chest, and pinched something off his shirt. You had something on your shirt. She looked him up and down, twisting the fibers that she pulled from his shirt. Henry returned the favor, looking her up and down as she sauntered into the kitchen. Jory, how about you help Veronica in the kitchen? Jory loudly objected, but got up anyway. Henry gave a wide berth and took his seat once he was in the kitchen. I don't know how to talk to either of them, Rick said. My son, Jory, is sensitive, and Veronica is insensitive. She seems headstrong, Henry said. Jory looks so much like you. Rick looked at him, a mix of consternation and the practiced smile of a man who has to hear things that should be commonplace, but aren't. They sat there, staring at the floor and occasionally making small talk while Veronica and Jory made food. Get ready. You're probably about to have quinoa, double pesto, paleo, and kale surprise, Rick said. She's been having me eat like this since she got here. Said too much of my food comes in cans. It smells good, Henry said, placing his hands between his legs. Veronica peered around the corner. It's ready. A new mood held the room with Veronica's smile. She had the poise of a woman much more affluent than her peers. Her beauty had a polish and professional edge to it, different than the other women who were lucky enough to comprehend a makeup tutorial. Looking Henry in the eye for longer than she should have, she asked, How old are you? 56. How long have you known my dad? Only a few months. Oh, then you're not who I thought you were. Rick put himself in front of his daughter and said, Can you find the cake knife and the spatula thing? He asked. Veronica turned and rifled through a drawer and closed it, repeating the process until she found the desired items. The men were at the table, Henry taking the chair closest to the door, Jory the chair closest to the wall, and Rick by the window, leaving the chair next to Henry open. Rick tapped his son's hand and motioned for the chair. Jory groaned but moved next to Henry. Veronica looked disappointed, but sat where she was told. Jory ate his food in silence, clicking his fork on his plate after he was done for several agonizing seconds. Jory, how about you stop doing that? Veronica said. Henry was grateful for her intervention. The tink-tink-tink was setting his teeth on end. How come we're not in your house, Dad? Rick looked to Veronica and said, Tell them why we're not in my house. Because you took out several second mortgages and didn't pay them back, Veronica answered, swiping her phone and not making eye contact. The reaction was a mix of exasperation and embarrassment. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped on her fork. So that's the story we're going with, Rick said. A brief flash of anger possessed Veronica. She set her fork down, turned her phone over, and folded her arms. Yes, she seethed. You could have helped at any time, Rick said. I did. I bought you this house and kept it in my name. Veronica grabbed a half-eaten dinner and set it in the sink, leaving the room. Henry knew Rick was having financial problems, but he didn't know to what degree. Veronica opened the front door and slammed it. Her car turned on, and then she was gone. You have to fix this one, Jory said. Henry felt that it was his turn to leave. He finished his food and took his plate to the sink. Jory stood next to him. I would advise against leaving right now. He'll take it as you lusting after my sister. I don't know where she's going, Henry defended. That's not the point, Jory said. Jory left when Rick started shouting at him. Go find her. I don't care where you go. She makes bad decisions when she gets mad and runs away. Jesus Christ, she's 38. She's old enough to make whatever decisions she wants, Jory says. That's not the point. We need to be there for her when she's hurting. Well, you'd be able to do that if you could drive, Jory said. I'm going, but I'm not going to look for her. Jory left in much the same way, slamming the door and revving his engine and spitting rocks as he left. Aye, Rick said, running his hands over his balding head. He sighed heavily and said, I'm in recovery. You know that I don't know why I'm telling you, but I need a drink. Do I need to call your sponsor? Henry asked. No. Let's just go bowling. After a few frames, Rick started to unwind, forcing Henry to sniff the bottle that he held to make sure it didn't contain alcohol. It was obnoxious, but Henry understood the sentiment. Rick stood and took his turn, hitting a gutter ball both times. The game was over and Henry had won by 35 points. Rick sat back down and asked if he wanted to bowl another game. If you want. Don't do the woman thing, Henry. Well, I'm good to bowl one more game, Henry said. Rick stood up and then sat back down, removing his shoes. She'll be back by now. Henry followed suit. Come with me, Rick said. I need to show you something. The old mall had been closed since the last leg of the Obama administration, and squatters came and went as they wished. The company hired a security guard to patrol at night. He ended up smoking weed with his buddies in the old Victoria's Secret store. Rick led him to the H&M store, shined his light on the extra-large billboard advertising an outfit that had long gone out of fashion. This billboard never changed, no matter how long the mall had been opened. Henry looked at the long-legged girl in the miniskirt, quarter jacket with faux fur collar that covered her red bustier with black lace underneath, balancing on knee-high pin heels. The girl looked familiar. She had occupied this wall since the town was booming. This was more than just a girl who existed somewhere in the corner of his mind. Why are you showing me this? Henry asked. That is how my daughter was able to pay for a house outright, and how she affords to drive around in that fancy car she has. Henry took another look at the imposing advertisement and realized why she looked so familiar and why Veronica walked with such confidence and grace. That's your daughter? Henry asked. Yeah. This was her big break. Rick's phone rang. Hey, she's at the house, Jory said. Okay, we'll be back soon. While Rick drove, Henry looked up a Veronica model. This produced too many results. He needed her last name and found nothing. He searched the connection with H&M and found Veronica Branson. She was H&M's darling child. Many YouTube shorts, TikToks, and Reels showed her signature walk. She didn't cross one foot over the other, like the other models, but made up for it in swagger and presentation. Every long dress she spun or flung with a flourish that exuded attitude. Swimwear, lingerie, some bad movies. The top search results. Your daughter is worth $20 million. You looking her up now? Henry hadn't realized how it would look to Rick until now. Only your net worth, Henry lied. Rick pulled up to Henry's car and said, I'll call you later. Henry got out and drove home.